Mopar people. I'm glad to finally be done working on a Mustang. Back on part 2 of my engine build here, and I was just going to show you how to check this crankshaft in play real quick. I've got Joe Z's dial gauge set up here. He let me borrow. I appreciate it. And yeah, so I always reference this book. I've had it for a while. Build a Small Block Mopar. I've got the other book, I believe by, let's see who this one. This one is Bert. I think the other one may be Shepherd or somebody, but this shows you more of how to build a motor, and it talks more about a Magnum, but most of these things are the same. So we're looking for crankshaft in play 2 to 7 thousandths. The limit's 10 thousandths, and this is a used crank that I had turned, so I want to be sure and double check it, be sure it's right. So right now I've got my gauge zeroed out, and I have taken this is just a pry bar, so I pried all the way that direction and let it relax. Get my gauge on 0 here, and then I will just pry against this other main. Not too much pressure, but enough just to move it all it can. See, I'm already at 1. Let me go back on 0, and that is it. So about 3 to 4 thousandths, which is in tolerance. That's fine. Wanted to show you that. Be sure. I mean, any crank, new or used, could be bad or out of spec, as you'd say it, but this one's good. Probably not going to get these put in the motor today, but I will get them put together, and that's what I'll show you. These are my stock 360 rods out of the engine that I took apart, and when I pulled those apart, I didn't mark them. I went ahead and marked back over it with a black magic marker, but I'll put my dot on there just to show that that went towards the front of the engine. If you look at these rods, there's a chamfer on one side, and that chamfer normally goes towards, let me roll this real quick. Chamfer goes towards the crankshaft journal, so I'll show you what that means. This is a number 1 rod. See my dot will go forward. That chamfer, I'll let you look, it's chamfered on that side, not really on that side. So that chamfer will go towards the front of the crank here. When you do number 2, the chamfer will go towards that back part there. So that probably just helps with oiling. So this is the number 1 rod. It'll go in that hole. That'll be the front. And here's my piston. I believe these are sealed Power Speed Pros. They're weight matched. This motor was not balanced. It's not a race engine, so it's fine. My motor's been turned 60 over, and the valve reliefs are the same size. So let me show you this real quick. Not quite dummy proof. So if you're, and I have to look it up every time because I forget. So I'm back on my number 1 hole. This was my number 1 piston. The valve reliefs will always go up on a 360 Mopar, or I guess any Mopar block, big block or small block. So if that's going up, we need to figure out which way to orient our rod, right? So all I did was set that there. It's our number 1 rod. That goes towards the front. So these will go on here. So when you buy these pistons, they are press fit, or they have the locking rings. And in order to make your stock rods work, to make them float, right? Because that's kind of a performance thing, is having that able to float on the wrist pin instead of the wrist pin moving inside the piston all the time. You have to get these honed. So mine have been honed, and he drills the end of them also. So getting those honed, he said about 1/1000th clearance is all it needs. But we've done this on race engines, mostly bracket cars. So under 600 horsepower, stock rods seem to usually work pretty well. If this was anything special, I would replace the rod bolts, but it's not. It's just kind of my inside. This one's marked here, so I'll just make that an arrow. That is the front of my motor. Right, so whenever that rod gets on there, I can orient it, my dots, to my arrow like that. There's my chamfer, and all that goes in like that. I should be good to go. But I'll test fit it just to be sure instead of doing 8 of them wrong. One thing I don't really like are these kind of cheap locking rings, but I googled it. It says they use them in a lot of their Speed Pro pistons, so people don't seem to have bad luck with them. I'll go ahead and use it, I guess. I'm used to like a spiral lock from a better quality piston. So I find my mark, my dot, drops in here, clean that out already. This is just test fitting, so that wrist pin moves freely, no hang-ups. So we can't stick it together here. And I won't even put the ring in for now. The rods always go, just like I showed you the mains, the notch will go to the notch side. So like that. And if you're unsure, check for that chamfer. See it right there? This side's chamfered, this side's not. This one is chamfered, that side's not. So when you put that together, it is notch to notch. Let's go back to our motor just a second. Alright. See my dot? Dot's going towards the front. That is my chamfered side, and my valve reliefs are at the top, so it would drop in just like that. And be good. Alright, so after I got number 1 figured out, that chamfer is going towards the front of the motor. This is my front. My valve relief on this would be on the bottom, which is actually on the top, because it will roll like that. If that makes sense. I can do 3, 5, and 7 the same way. So I just kept them in order numerically. And I can stick them together for now. Cleaning out the inside of the wrist pin holes. I still got to wipe out. I really thoroughly like to wipe everything, so before I put a bearing in anything, it'll get wiped. But if you can see, my number 1 is upside down. That goes towards the front. This is the same way. Just fit it in for a minute. There's my 3. Clean out the wrist pin hole. There's my 5. And my 7. Now we can double check. Chamfer goes towards the front. My valve reliefs are on that side. Chamfer, valve reliefs, chamfer, valve reliefs, and chamfer, valve reliefs. Alright, number 2 piston. Those will be going, those on the upside. A lot of times they do it where you can read the number if it's in the motor. So that's not always true, but most of the time. See, that mark's on that side this time, so if we ignore it, we put our arrow on this side. That's number 2. Be right there. Grab my number 2 rod. And it has a dot. Dot goes towards the front. That would put my chamfer towards the back on the even side. So, chamfer towards the rear. If that dropped in, these would be on top. I like it. So now I can do my others the same way. I'll set that on the bench. So, marks in the front. Find my dot from earlier. Dot goes toward my mark. Easy. 6. And 8. Now when we double check these, they all should match my number 2. Mark towards the front. Valve release facing me. Remember, it's opposite of last time. So front, reliefs, front, reliefs, and front, reliefs. Now I can go ahead and start lubing those and get them together. Quick view of how they would go on the motor. 1, 3, 5, 7, 2, 4, 6, 8. Just like that. I'm going to go ahead and take my clips and put them in the back side of every one of these pistons. Just get that out of the way. I recommend, just for these cheapos, get your favorite pair of needle nose pliers out. That's it. Simple stuff. I'll probably orient them all the same, just to make me feel better. I don't know if there's actually a science to that or not. I did look online, nobody said anything, so. Have my own floating pins here. Alright, you'll remember from last time my secret family recipe of Lucas oil mixture. It's just 50-50 with some 1030 Rotella. And basically all I'm going to do now is just push these pins back out like that and coat the inside of my rod. So if I can do it over the piston, then the piston will catch some of that oil, but basically it'll look like this. I can get that around. Remember my orientation. Don't get confused. Put that in there. Slide the pin a little. Little dab, little dab. And push that through. Go in and out a couple times, just be safe. Don't want anything dry, right? There we are. Now I'll throw the clip in that one. There it is. Push down. Got that clip. There we are. I can't get that pin back. Yeah, if they're building a motor in the day, I don't know Not sure how. Give it a smear. Push it in, push it in, push it in. Let's do a little that way, what do you say? That film of stuff will be there in a month when I start this motor up. I guarantee you your money back. There it is. Click, click button. Lots easy floating going on here. I'll show you one side. Oh, maybe move on to something else. I know y'all get tired of watching the boring stuff. My friend Dan on Facebook says there's nothing boring about building engines. That there. Got my wrist pin stuck in, and you think, let's go ahead and throw that motor together. Well, we got to check all of our ring gaps, and here's how you do that. This is the top ring, top compression ring. Always follow the sheet, whatever the sheet says. My top ring, my number 1, does not have a dot on it or any mark. So I've looked both sides, a dot or a laser mark. I've looked for a bevel. There's no bevel. So I went ahead and stuck her down in there a couple inches and just used my old piston, or my new piston I mean. Stuck it like that and got it. I usually go down to where the skirt starts, or something that's pretty dead on for depth. And mine is show you what that is. 19 thousandths. So it was a very tight 19, and this chart, which is in many different languages here, doesn't actually tell you what your clearances are, but I've got one here. I'll show you. I got this from Mr. Rick. So I'm just going the high performance street strip bore times 45 thousandths for the top ring, and that gave me 18 thousandths, or 18 thousandths and a little bit. So my top ring's good on my number 1 cylinder, so I can go ahead and pull that. Now we do our number 2 ring. Number 2 does have a dot. See if I can show that to you. The dot is right there. So that dot will go towards the top. Get it started. Same thing. There we go. And I've still got that 19 thousandths out. I'll just check it with that. Yeah, 19 is pretty much there. And 20 is very tight. So that is 20 thousandths. So, let's see. Times 50 thousandths. It even says here, minimum is 15 thousandths on either one. So I'm at 20, it's good, but I'm going to check it one more. 2 rings will work with my number 1 piston in the number 1 hole, and I will put those on in just a second. But before I put any rings on, I was reading in the old small block Mopar book, and it says the rings must be positioned properly. Now I've never done this before. I've always just put my rings on 180 degrees opposite each other. I've never had a problem. This says the gap in the top ring should be located towards the spark plug. I've never done that, but I'll try it with this engine. So I'll show you real quick what there's a 318, so my heads are basically the same as that. My valve reliefs are up, so the opposite side of my valve reliefs, I'm going to put a mark on all my pistons. I actually put 2 marks. So get my black magic marker back out. So here's my valve reliefs. Try to get them here for you. The opposite side of that for the top ring, I'm just going to put a quick mark, and that ring will line up with that. This one will go with that. So they'll be 180 degrees away from each other, but I'll be doing it the same way on all of them. So if something's wrong, it's the book's fault this time, not mine. Pistons marked for my rings to go on. I'll leave them in a stack. Go ahead and stick my other stacks here. I'm going to check every ring in the block before I see you next time. And on episode 3, we're going to knock some pistons in. So thank y'all for watching and sticking with me on this build. I will make it to a drag strip with this at some point, I promise. And we'll see what a 360 with 60 over Speed Pro pistons can do. I'll also, after I get the pistons in next time, I'll measure the piston height, see how far down they are in the bore, and be able to calculate my compression for you. So, thanks for watching.